Hey, welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about the Greek myth of Phaethon. So this is from the Greek myths, and the main characters are Phaethon and Apollo. Now, probably many of you have had this happen to you where you have to visit dad because they have visitation rights divided between the two of them. And so you go back and forth and shuffle between the houses. Now, Phaethon is a child of Apollo with a human woman. So he is a demigod. And what that means is he's half human and he's half divine. It also means that he won't live forever. Now, when Phaethon goes to visit Apollo on top of Mount Olympus, he can see how great things are. And then when he's back with his mom, because Apollo is kind of like the Disneyland daddy, is what I like to call it. I've raised two children from two different fathers who have what I call Disneyland dads. Those are the dads that do something spooktacular once in a while, but don't have ongoing contact. So it's been a long, long time since Phaethon has visited his father, who is the sun god. What that means is that Apollo is responsible for taking the sun up every night and then making it set across the world. Things aren't logical in mythology. So for it to work, he'd have to do the other side of the world after that, and he'd be working 24 hours a day. But we're not talking about logic here. We're talking about Apollo drives a chariot with a bunch of steeds, and the wheel of the chariot is the sun itself. Now, Phaethon finally ends up his father has time to see him, and so he goes for that, first time in 5-year visitation. And Apollo is so happy to see Phaethon that he tells his son, "Ask me whatever you want. I am a god, and I will give it to you." And Phaethon, being a young man, says, "I want to drive your chariot." And his dad says, "Ask me whatever else you want and I'll give it to you." But Phaethon insists and says, "Look, you promised. You said you'd give me whatever I asked for." And Apollo reneges and agrees with Phaethon and lets him stand and to drive his chariot to bring the sun over the world. He's worried, but it's true. He doesn't want to go back on his word. So Phaethon gets in the chariot. He's got the sun right there down by him. He's got the 6 steeds in front of him, and he takes off. And at first, everything is going okay. But then soon the steeds realize that the dude doesn't know what he's doing because he's never driven the chariot before. And he doesn't know when to pull back on the reins or let them go, how to turn them. And so he goes way, way up high, and the earth starts to freeze. And then he overcorrects like new drivers do, and he goes way close to the earth, and everything starts to burn up. And he's erratic, and the steeds, he can't tame them. He can't make them go where he wants to. They're not following the normal course of the sun. They're everywhere. So land is freezing. People are getting burned up. And it is absolute chaos. Crops are getting burned. Crops are getting frozen. And Zeus looks down on this chaos that has been created by his brother Apollo by giving permission for his son to drive his car. his chariot, and Zeus sends a lightning bolt, and he kills Phaethon, and then the steeds take the chariot back onto the regular course and finish out the day. Now, in some versions of this myth, it could explain why is there winter, why are there droughts. It could also explain, in some versions, why people are different colors. Because when he went way, way up, people didn't get sunlight, and so they turned out white. But when he went way, way down, people turned black. Now, obviously, this is a way of explaining the world. Black people are not black because they got too close to the sun. But this story is an example of the concept of hubris. And as I've said before, hubris means breaking one's boundaries, being too arrogant. It's excessive pride, being too arrogant to know where it is that you should stay in your life. Phaethon doesn't understand that something as important as the sun on earth is above his expertise. Because he's just like, Dad, let me take your hot rod out. And no, what that ends up with is Phaethon's hubris gets punished by death. I don't know if that shows up very well. Let me see. Now the next, so think about what this myth explains, what questions it answers. Think about you as a teenager driving your parents' cherished car. The next myth, Greek myth, I want to talk to you about is the myth of Narcissus. And Narcissus is the most beautiful, I mean completely beautiful person. The completely beautiful man. But since he's so beautiful, he's just used to walking through life being beautiful. And one day when Narcissus is walking in the forest, a nymph named Echo sees him, and she falls in love with Narcissus. Narcissus is too stuck up to return any of her attention. And because of that, Echo withers away and she ends up dying. And the whole time that she's going through this process of being rejected by Narcissus, she cries. And the cries can be heard everywhere through the forest. And yet, when she dies, her echo still persists. Narcissus doesn't care about just another scorned lover. He's had many lovers. But Nemesis, the goddess Nemesis, looks at this suffering and decides to punish Narcissus for Echo's death. And so she turns him into a flower. Because the whole time when he's out in the forest, he tends to go out to a lake and look into it and gaze upon his own reflection. Have you met people like that who love to watch themselves in mirrors? I met an elementary school teacher who was a good friend of mine, and she was a great teacher. She would teach Shakespeare and put on a Shakespearean performance with fifth graders every year. But when I was talking to her and looking her in the eyes, if there was a reflective surface anywhere, she was gazing at herself. So Narcissus ends up forever being punished by having to gaze at himself in a lake and no longer being able to move. He's a flower. Nemesis avenges Echo's love for Narcissus' rejection. This is where the psychological term, because if you are interested in psychology, Sigmund Freud was very well rehearsed on the classics and on Greek mythology and Western philosophy. And so Freud called it narcissism, which means that all you have is self-interest. I wonder if you can think of anybody politically active today who is a narcissist. Narcissists don't care if they hurt your feelings. They care about me. Hold on. Me. Hold on. Me. All they care about is themselves. Narcissists have no empathy. They have no compassion. What they have is me. I'm sure you can also think about people in your lives that are like that, not just political figures. I want you to take a note on this. The word compassion, com means with, and passion, if you watch The Passion of Christ by Mel Gibson, the movie, it's not about how Jesus was so passionate, it's about his suffering. So with suffering. Take a note on this as well. Empathy means in, empathy, pathos, in feeling. Being able to feel what others feel. In feeling. Narcissus has none of these. He doesn't even have sympathy. Which means same feeling. He can't do the same feeling at all. Narcissus is too arrogant. He exhibits the idea of hubris. Excessive pride. He breaks the boundaries because he's a mortal young man, a demigod, but he can be killed, of course. And so when he takes his father's car out for a ride or his chariot, Zeus has nothing to do but to kill him to prevent him from destroying the world. Those are the myths of Narcissus and Phaethon. By the way, Phaethon actually is a Greek word that means chariot. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the myth. And I want you to think about what questions do these myths answer.